At one point, Julie Keith considered donating the unopened $29.99 Halloween graveyard kit she had purchased a few years prior. It was just gathering dust in storage, and who needs another set of Halloween decorations? Well, other than me. Then she had an idea. Why not open it up and use it to decorate for her daughter's 5th birthday? But when she opened up the package, she would be stunned to find a mysterious letter inside. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Around 1806, the old-fashioned was first mentioned, but not in the form we know it today. In actuality, the term old-fashioned was the first one people used to describe any type of cocktail. Yes, they had mixology in 1806. Similar to the old-fashioned fusions of today, these old-fashioned recipes included a variety of alcohol, from gin to mezcal. This was the situation up until the 1860s, when ordering bitters, water, and sugar, along with one's preferred spirit of choice, became even more popular. An old-fashioned made with rye whiskey was the most popular variation, according to a Chicago bartender in 1882. There are many conflicting accounts of whiskey history, as there are of all history. Some claim that the Pendennis Club, an exclusive social club in Louisville, Kentucky, is where the cocktail actually got its start around 1880. The bourbon distillery and bartender James E. Pepper are associated with the recipe. Before bringing the drink to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel Bar in New York City, rumors claim that James was a member of the Pendennis Club. Some say Louisville is the birthplace of the old-fashioned, while others insist New York City is the genuine origin. In any case, Louisville made the old-fashioned its official cocktail in 2015, and every June, a 2-week celebration dubbed the Old-Fashioned Fortnight is held to honor the beloved cocktail. But for spooky season, we had to make this drink a fall-themed. The original recipe for the pumpkin old-fashioned is listed in the description box. There are a couple of additional ingredients that have the effect of making the drink taste like you're drinking fall. Pumpkin spice latte, girlies, I got your drink. For the cocktail, you're going to take 1.5 parts bourbon whiskey, 1/2 part Grand Marnier, 1/2 part maple syrup, 2 tablespoons pumpkin puree, and a dash of aromatic bitters, and add it all to a shaker with ice. You'll need to shake this one quite a bit because of the pumpkin, but once it's good and shaken, strain over fresh ice. For the mocktail, take 1.5 parts non-alcoholic whiskey, 1/2 part orange juice, 1/2 part maple syrup, 2 tablespoons pumpkin puree, and a dash of aromatic bitters, and add to a shaker with ice. Bitters technically have alcohol, but in such small amounts is still considered non-alcoholic. However, if you'd like, you can always omit that. Shake until well combined in that shaker with ice, strain over fresh ice, and sip like the pumpkin king that you are. During the spooky season in 2010, or maybe a little after, Julie Keith went to a Kmart in Damascus, Oregon. Okay, before we even start, this is 2010. There were still Kmarts in the US at this point. You know, I had to find out. Evidently, the last Kmart actually closed in the state of Oregon in February of 2020. And as of this writing, there are 3 Kmarts still left in the United States. Listen, I fell down an entire rabbit hole on the rise and fall of Kmart, but I don't think that's what you came for. Suffice it to say, don't acquire more holdings than you can hold in your hands, or some kind of metaphor about not becoming, I don't know, too big for your britches or something like that. Anyway, that's not the point here. The point here is that there was a functioning open Kmart in Oregon where Julie Keith lived in 2010, and she shopped there. 42-year-old Julie Keith, a vehicle donation manager at a Southeast Portland Goodwill and a mother of 2, went to the elusive Kmart and bought a 17-piece graveyard kit, which included 5 tombstones, 2 black velvet roses, 2 mini skulls and their matching legs and feet, 2 spiders, a bag of spiderweb, a bag of moss, and a piece of bloody cloth. You're welcome for that level of detail. You get what you pay for. It was on clearance. Speaking of you get what you... Anyway, it was a blue light special, if you will. For whatever reason, Julie didn't open the Totally Ghoul kit with an authentic look, weight, and feel that retailed for $29.99. Okay, I'll stop reading the box. And Totally Ghoul is the brand, not a clever pun that I invented. Although if you thought it was me, then it was me. But either way, Julie put the package in her loft and left it alone for several whole years. I personally cannot imagine letting Halloween decorations sit for even 1 minute, but maybe that's my house. Regardless, a few years later, Julie considered donating the unopened package to her workplace, aka Goodwill, but instead decided it would make good decor for her spooky baby's 5th birthday, as she had requested a Halloween-themed party. As a spooky in my veins adult, I totally approve of this decision and think this child is very cool. So on a Saturday afternoon in October 2012, just before Halloween, Julie and her daughter got to work decorating. But when she ripped open the thin plastic of the graveyard package, she was in for a shocking surprise. As they opened the box and pulled out the decor, there was a note folded into eighths, tucked neatly in between 2 of the styrofoam gravestones. It fell on the ground. Her daughter picked it up and asked Julie to read it. Julie started to read the neat handwriting in blue ink, written in both English and Mandarin. Sir, if you occasionally buy this product, please kindly resend this letter to the World Human Rights Organization. Thousands of people here who are under the persecution of the Chinese Communist Party government will thank and remember you forever. People who work here have to work 15 hours a day without Saturday, Sunday break and any holidays. Otherwise, they will suffer torturement, beat, and rude remark. Nearly no payment, 10 yuan 1 month. People who work here suffer punishment 1 to 3 years averagely, but without court sentence, on law punishment. Many of them are Falun Gong practitioners who are totally innocent people only because they have different belief to CCPG. They often suffer more punishment than others." End quote. The letter also said that it was written in Unit 8, Department 2 of the Mazanjia labor camp in Shenyang, China. 10 yuan, equivalent to $1.61. $1.61 per month. Falun Gong is a spiritual practice based on Qigong exercises and meditation outlawed by the Chinese government. The Chinese Communist Party launched a campaign against Falun Gong in 1999 with the goal of outlawing the spiritual practice there while upholding the atheistic state ideology. It is distinguished by a comprehensive propaganda campaign, a forced ideological conversion and re-education program, and supposedly a wide range of not-so-legal coercive methods, such as arbitrary arrests, forced labor, and physical torture, which can sometimes be fatal. Mazanjia was the most notorious labor camp in the system. Reports of torture and other human rights violations at Mazanjia have persisted for a long time. Former detainees who spoke with the New York Times claim that Falun Gong practitioners are subjected to abuse on a regular basis and to a greater extent than other groups. According to a Chinese journalist who spent 5 years interviewing former Mazanjia prisoners, physical punishment was widespread at the camp, and some women ended up handicapped. Various forms of torture were allegedly utilized at the camp, including beatings and detainees being dangled by their arms and stunned in the face with electric prods. And we buy the styrofoam tombstones they make. After reading the unsigned letter, Julie was stunned. Someone had sent a message in a bottle, more than 5,000 miles away, from across the Pacific Ocean. Julie saw that he had written that thousands were being held. She thought about the amount of daring and desperation the author of the letter must have had in order to stuff the letter into the package. She couldn't just do nothing. She had to do something. But what? Having absolutely no idea where to start, Julie went to Facebook. She took a picture of the letter and posted on her page, quote, "I found this in a box of Halloween decorations," end quote. And she got in touch with Human Rights Watch, an international non-governmental organization with its main office in New York City. Human Rights Watch focuses on human rights, advocacy, and research. Sophie Richardson, China director at Human Rights Watch, would say, quote, "We're in no position to confirm the veracity or origin of this. I think it is fair to say the conditions described in the letter certainly conform to what we know about conditions in re-education throughout labor camps," end quote. Julie got in touch with U.S. Customs, who came to interview her. U.S. Customs contacted Kmart, who released a statement saying, quote, "Sears Holdings has a global compliance program which helps to ensure that vendors and factories producing merchandise for our company adhere to specific program requirements and all local laws pertaining to employment standards and workplace practices. Failure to comply with any of the program requirements, including the use of forced labor, may result in a loss of business or factory termination. We understand the seriousness of this allegation and will continue to investigate," end quote. Did anyone notice the little key phrase in there? May result in a loss of business? They also essentially stated that they didn't contract with these labor camps or work with companies who were contracting these labor camps, which, I mean, seems like they do considering the letter that was in their product, but who am I to say? They probably denied it because it's illegal. Title 19, Section 1307 of U.S. Code generally prohibits the importation of all items mined, produced, or manufactured in any foreign country by convict labor, forced labor, and/or indentured labor. Finding these outlets really going nowhere, Julie went to the press. The news story was published in the Oregonian on Christmas Eve of 2012, and then the story went viral. The letter made headlines worldwide and focused Western attention on Chinese labor camps. In the winter of 1997, Sun Yi was working in the oil industry as an engineer. One day, he saw a group of people exercising in the town square. He was curious how they could be doing that when it was so cold outside. He started to look into the practice, which he would discover was called Falun Gong. He began his journey as a Falun Gong practitioner because it taught truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and it made him a better person. For him, it improved the body and the mind. He quit smoking, and he became more selfless. Falun Gong grew rapidly in China, having upwards of 100 million practitioners at its height. The Communist Party had only 60 million followers, and it was that fear that caused the Communist Party to outlaw the practice of Falun Gong. Sun Yi himself was arrested or detained dozens of times for his outspoken support of Falun Gong. He would produce flyers and booklets to try and counter the communist propaganda. He had hidden compartments built into his furniture in his house to hide paper, printers, computers, and other supplies. In 2008, on the horizon of the Beijing Olympics, the persecution intensified. Rewards were offered for people to turn in their neighbors. Despite his massive efforts to be careful, Sun Yi was arrested. He was sentenced quickly to 2.5 years of hard labor at Mazanjia. He was assigned to the team in charge of making Halloween decorations, Unit 8, and he noted that the boxes for the decor were all in English and said, "Made in China." Concluding that these were destined for either Europe or America, he made a daring decision. He got his hands on some paper, and late at night, with only the sounds of the crickets keeping him company, he would pull the paper out from under his pillow, where he'd hidden it. He would be laying on his bed facing the wall. He wrote on the soft paper, hiding it whenever the guards patrolled near him. It would take more than one night to write one letter. He was very careful about how he hid the letters he wrote in the boxes of decorations. He timed the hiding with batches that were going to be loaded onto the truck immediately. And when the inmates would leave for a break, he would linger back to hide the letters. He managed to smuggle 20 letters into Halloween sets bound for the United States, and was able to do this until the Olympics came. And then things became a lot more strict. More inspections, more crackdowns, more torture of Falun Gong practitioners, including Sun Yi. It has been said that the tortures that Sun Yi himself suffered in the Mazanjia labor camp are of the stuff seen only in movies. Days and days on end. He would have no way of knowing, of even dreaming, that a random American woman had found his cry for help. Sun Yi's sister managed to locate a human rights lawyer, and with their efforts, his sentence was not extended. By the time the story of the found letter hit the airwaves, Sun Yi had been released from Mazanjia for about 2 years. Daily, Sun Yi would bypass the Chinese internet filters and read Western news when one day he came upon the story of the message in a 21st century bottle. Sun Yi was conflicted. He was at once happy that word was being spread about what was happening in China, but on the other, he was worried about his safety. A New York Times reporter would eventually make contact with Sun Yi. Pressure began to mount from inside and outside China after the letter hit the press. The Chinese government was forced to take action. They announced sweeping reforms, including the abolishment of labor camps, setting some 160,000 prisoners free. But though the labor camps were gone, the persecution continued. Sun Yi's lawyer disappeared, thought to be detained and imprisoned by the Chinese government. The police raided Sun Yi's sister's home, and they also raided Sun Yi and Fu Ning, his wife of over 20 years, Beijing home. Fearing for his safety, Sun Yi fled China without his wife, seeking asylum in Indonesia in 2016. Life in Indonesia was difficult for Sun Yi. As an asylum seeker, he couldn't work. It took 2 years to get an appointment to get refugee status. He worked to learn Indonesian and continued to work on his English. He was unable to talk to his wife, for her fear that the Chinese government would come after her. He had to get rid of all evidence of her, including photographs and letters. Sun Yi and Julie Keith met in 2017. Julie traveled to Jakarta to meet the man whose letter changed her life and so many others. Julie's fears were alleviated that what she had done had put Sun Yi in danger, and in fact, he considered Julie his sister and would always be indebted to her. Sun Yi expressed his gratitude to Julie on behalf of himself and others that had been persecuted by the Chinese government. They talked about Halloween, and Julie explained what RIP meant, letters he had only seen on the decorations he had suffered to make. Together, they looked at the letter that had traveled 5,000 miles and back again, and the little words that made a big difference. Soon after Julie and Sun Yi met, he was contacted by a suspected Chinese secret agent. 2 months later, Sun Yi died of acute kidney failure under mysterious circumstances. His wife and sisters attended his funeral in Indonesia, but despite their request, an investigation into the cause of death was not granted. He was 50 years old. Sun Yi would say, quote, "I'd like to tell the world millions of people in China are still suffering persecution, but in the end, justice will prevail over evil." End quote. If you want to hear about Sun Yi's full experience in the Mazanjia labor camp, I highly, highly, highly recommend you watch the documentary he starred in, filmed, and helped produce, called Letter from Mazanjia. The film was produced by a Canadian filmmaker, but that filmmaker did it remotely. This story was made by Sun Yi. You can hear his story in his own words, and I have to tell you, I sobbed all the way through it. It's free to stream on Amazon if you have Prime. It's not the lighthearted fare I've been moving towards at Capers and Cocktails, but it's important. And what can you do? I don't know. But I, for one, have been paying more attention to where my goods are made. I'm just one person, and this probably doesn't make much difference, but I can sleep a little better at night. You might not be able to do this, but maybe if enough people do, speak with your wallet, I guess. And though the labor camps are abolished, it doesn't mean that exploitation of people is abolished. So I just want to be a little more careful about the products that I buy, just a little more mindful. Thanks for hanging out with me. This was a challenging one for me to research, but I'm glad I did. I'm sorry that Sun Yi and his family didn't have the happy ending they deserved. I'm proud of Julie Keith for not just throwing away that letter. It made a difference. Next week, we round out my favorite month of the year with another ghost story. This time, it's the tragic and dramatic tale of the infamous Limp Brewery and family from St. Louis. And the drink to match is absolutely the greatest drink I've ever made for Capers and Cocktails. That is, if you like coconut. Get the ingredients in the description box, as well as the links to socials and the link to book a live show. I can tell this tale or another. I'll see you next week. And remember, there are always alternatives to persecuting people for their beliefs.